This is Almost Beach Class Interviews. I'm Gil, and I dig the creative process. Today, my guest is
Luuk Honey, and I'm a guitar player in the band CERAS, bass player in the band Yellow, and painter, artist, creator of all different kinds of things.
I'd be curious, what's your advice for aspiring artists?
Yeah, so my advice for artists today would be to lean into whatever provides your flow state. And whether that is finding space and time for yourself, because those are two elements that for me are very important to my creativity and my creative process. And so I've just done all that I could to energetically invest in myself in the ways that I need in order to create most fluidly.
A little bit ago, before we were rolling, we were talking about um, the application of your studio time.
Mhm.
I'm curious, how did that come into keeping this time and space prioritized in your life?
Mm. Yeah. So interestingly, I think it goes back to before COVID. I was living a really different kind of a lifestyle where I was in bands, but I was working a lot more. And nothing against, like anybody who is a working class artist, because that's what I identify with as myself. And um, yeah, I think that after I changed careers, I just decided that I needed that space for myself in order to really do what I was envisioning for myself all along. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be recognized as an artist.
I mean, switching your career to art as
Full
like,
time. Yeah.
dude,
Because I, had kind of been part timing it,
well,
and
congrats on that, because I feel like hella people say they wanna, be an artist, and then they say, "After 5 PM on Tuesdays only."
right. Yeah. I mean, that's the lifestyle I was living for sure because I ran my own coffee shop for a while, and then I switched and actually helped Pelican Bay Books in Anacortes run their coffee shop. I was there for 4 years. I was the lead barista, and I just dedicated my energy to it. And all the while, I was still creating art and really doing my best to envision new things. I wanted to make a graphic novel at the time. That was really the direction that I was leaning into. And I think that that's still possible for me, but I have kind of approached life a little differently. And I know that with COVID, everybody, I think, should be living life in a way where it's like we've seen how precious that life is.
Mm.
And we should treat life as precious as that, where it's like live intentionally every day. And, if there is something inside of you that you feel like if you can't get it out, you won't be able to go on living, then that is really like the passion, of every artist. I feel like that get it out, do whatever it takes to get it out. And, that's like that dedication to the space and the time. committing to yourself, that it's like, I have to get this expression out of me somehow.
I can relate to that, of that cathartic feeling
Yeah.
of that it's gonna come out of me regardless,
Hmm, hmm.
and at least personally for me, that I really wanna make it constructively come out of me,
Yeah.
and not just as little literal or emotional scribbles.
Hmm, hmm,
Um,
hmm.
with your business background, how has that inspired/informed
Hmm.
how you orient yourself professionally as an artist?
Yeah. Well, you're leaning into that, as you're saying it. I think that it kind of comes down to the infrastructure,
Okay.
and and this is another thing Ethan Hawke said just recently, like on this.
And for our listeners, who's
Yeah,
Ethan Hawke?
Ethan Hawke is an actor, producer, director. He was, I think, started as a child actor, but he's just been kind of like sharing ideas recently, and I've just been really resonating with them. But one thing that he said is advice to actors
Mm.
that I thought was really profound for anybody. Is preparation, 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 and then let go. Whenever it comes time to perform, just know that you've done all of the preparation work. It's kind of like on test day, you've studied, you've done all of the studying. So on test day, you just have to trust that you're not going to know what obstacles are going to come next, but you're going to be ready.
You're giving me this mental image of the antithesis of that, of the kid who
Mm,
goes, "I'm not gonna study for the test."
totally.
They said that we're allowed to have our study guides during the
Hmm.
exam, and then they're
Yeah.
flipping through it like crazy, don't have enough time for it because they didn't have that preparation, and they tried to perform from a place of acute go time,
Right.
of not
Right.
treating the practice seriously and the infrastructure seriously.
Well, ironically, I can reference an anime that illustrates that dichotomy of talent versus skill. There's a show called One Punch Man.
I have a homie who loves that show.
Yeah, I do too. And, the main character is kind of the epitome of natural talent. And it just doesn't even make sense. He talks about his workout routine and it's like so basic, but he has like superhuman strength. Whereas there's another character who's just like everything, every fiber of his being is all about studying, discipline, trying to commit so much, but he never seems to be able to land it as naturally as someone who has all of this kind of natural born talent. But the two of them as a team, because you have someone who's very strategy minded, very skill set based, versus someone who is just this natural talent, but maybe doesn't actually come from this background of discipline. And that's the
It's like a
factor.
metaphor of the self, of the here's our
100%.
natural born gifts. Are
Yes.
we able to, I was gonna say control, but I think channel might be a better, I guess channel and
Yeah.
control,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, Rick Rubin says, we're all basically conduits. As artists, we're basically mediums,
Hmm,
and our ideas aren't just coming to us, we're kind of yielding them,
mm.
as these beings, I don't really know, or I don't want to put it into too spiritual of terms.
I understand what you're saying, that there's that creative ideas come to us, we don't flex our brain and get them. That it's the development of those creative ideas
Yeah.
is what we do as humans.
Well, and again, not to be overly ironic, but my last name is Honey. And I often think of creative ideas as it's like gathering pollen. And the art is really that, we've collected all of the nectar and we're making the honey,
Mm.
and that's like this thing that we all get to share and enjoy. And, that's what the queen wants, and in a way, I think that creating art, is like appeasing the muses, because you think about inspiration coming to you. And I've heard many artists talk about, especially in regard to preparation, preparation, preparation. I kind of have this mindset whenever I'm going to start a new painting. I really want to set up my whole area, like make it nice, make it inviting. And not just for me, but for my creative inspiration for when that moment comes, because it feels like something supernatural.
Hmm.
And
That flow state is kinda what you're talking about.
exactly,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
and inspiration, whatever you want to call it, and I think that you could get into spiritual terminology about it, but I think that uh, what we're just kind of just discussing is
I'm kind of
creative
dabbling
ideas.
into some spiritual stuff. One of my so I'm a multimedia creator too that um but I would say that I am more in my exploration period of my different mediums that I draw, I write, I songwrite, and one of the newer mediums that I'm doing is documentary making,
Mm,
and it's about tarot and how tarot can
mhm.
be a useful tool and also as a potential danger if misused. So I just bring that
Oh
up
yeah,
that I am down to explore the woo woo.
yeah,
I'm
cool,
a novice, but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I've
But
been practicing tarot for maybe like 8 years myself. And Alejandro Jodorowsky was kind of like one of the major inspirational figures for me to explore it more. And I think that he's like a majorly inspirational figure for me as an artist as well. And then connecting in kind of like the spiritual world of it. We as Westerners, we're very like logical, we're super scientific, and he kind of describes himself as this like kind of like mutt, in his terms because he's like uh, Mexican, Peruvian, Jewish, Russian. He's just all these different things, and he studied Buddhism and Zen and then the tarot, and he came from this Catholic background,
I
and
like that
so
there's an overlapping of
mhm,
traditions.
yes,
So what a person with such a unique personal history can be able
mhm.
to find hopefully some more unifying truths that overlap from all those different kinds of faiths per se.
Well, the way that I see it is you have the world of science and the world of spirituality, and I think that the way of the artist is synthesis because we're kind of like mythologists, and so we have to like utilize from both in like a
Mm,
creative way.
cool.
And, because it's like, especially with science fiction, you see it the most because they're the most aware of the dichotomy, of like that mindset, of like seeing the world in two different lenses,
I know
you
what you
know?
mean that science fiction that you're seeing reality for what it could be, and
Yep.
then you're working with the tangible to see, can we get it there?
Yep.
Dun dun dun, you
Well,
know?
and that also is the tarot. Just what you just said, because in a lot of other, maybe more like spiritual or mystical practices where you have variable factors, elements that you're seeing that represent essentially mystery. And I just read this poem this morning from Mary Oliver, and it said, the other name for God is mystery.
I
Or
like
it could
that.
be the other way around. The name of mystery is, I can't exactly phrase it as Mary Oliver, but um, I think that tarot or um, the I Ching, these kind of like,
Tools of divination.
yeah, they, I think, are opening up the more like symbolic, interpretive sides of our brain.
Mm,
And I think that that connects us in a way to sort of like our primordial ancestors and our most primal senses, the thing that's most connected to nature. But then there's like this side of us that's like evolved or
absolutely.
wanting to be evolved, self aware, making sense of
Mm,
things, the meaning making machine side of things, where it's like,
okay.
it's logical, it's like, it's got to make sense somehow.
So right there, I
Yeah.
think there's this part of manifestation of working towards the future for what could be, and I think the
Hmm.
part
Hmm.
that makes it very um, attractive to be able to talk to you through that lens is that you are disciplined and that you work on that. And without that, you're praying
Hmm.
to something that you're not connected to or investing into.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
just to get
Hmm.
to brass tacks,
Hmm.
how have you balanced those two sides of
Hmm.
relaxing the brain, looking
Hmm.
within for what's in there and what's going to come out, and then how to channel that in
Yeah.
our tangible world of microphones
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
just shit in the
Um,
way or tools too maybe, I don't know.
Well, I love metaphor, and illusion and analogy. So once again, to reference anime, if anybody's watching Delicious in Dungeon, the character Senshi basically paraphrases it really
Uh,
well. that circadian rhythm is key. So you need good rest. You also need good nutrition and exercise. And those are the three most valuable factors in really being good at what you do, being like the strongest, being the smartest, being the best overall, just anything that you're doing, you want to have those three things basically
You
lined
know,
up. It seems so
I
basic,
yeah,
so
but
simple.
we overlook it as a culture
Totally.
because when COVID
We're in
happened,
grind culture.
we freaked out and we go, "Oh
Mhm.
my god, what's the magic pill?" Of course, there's a million things that are great to take externally, but I didn't hear, "Hey guys, remember to eat your veggies, take a nap, chill
Totally.
out. Let's treat the body the best
Totally.
way and go
Mhm.
really fundamental first." So yeah, I agree, and I honestly overlook it in my personal life too.
Well, you see burnout in our culture and in many cultures,
Mm.
because like we uh deprioritize the body's needs over what we think we need. And we think we need to keep up with everybody else, but we're not thinking about what is it that my body is needing in order to keep up in this race. And I think I'm seeing it less like a race and more like a game
Because you could
nowadays,
just go from that lens of play and not
Yeah.
of competition, even
Yes.
with the self.
Yes. Well put. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm just kind of so past hierarchy, and I know
Mm.
that like it's very immersive in our society, and it's just kind of the language of capitalism, and the society that we exist in is very hierarchical. But I think in terms of artistry, that we as creators are the visionaries of a more equitable world. And I think
Wait,
that
can you say that one more time?
we as artists are the visionaries of a more equitable world.
What does that mean?
Well, I think that just like sci-fi creators or writers who have the ability to almost be like prophetic of a future that could exist, that
Hmm.
could be something without as much suffering as we're experiencing under our current age. Because, like, as you're aware, there is a genocide in many countries that's actually taking place at this very moment. And it feels systemically orchestrated. And I think that we all are aware that we're evolved and progressive enough that we should be able to realize how to utilize all of the resources that we have at our disposal so that we can create a world that doesn't have hunger, or that doesn't have like the separation,
I
of the
understand
classes
what you're
and
saying now
yeah.
because I watched this interview about this guy who was I'm not sure. I'm just gonna go with Buddhist for sakes and purposes, but some sort of monk and did
Mm, mhm,
like decades of studying, and I think the final test was is peace on earth possible?
mm,
And the answer that the master or whomever is the teacher is looking for is yes, but first we must find peace within ourselves, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about treat
totally.
yourself right, and then
Yeah.
we could expand that into
Mhm.
systems, businesses, and
That's it.
a little bit gloomy government wise and globally,
Mhm.
but I definitely believe that, and incrementally so. That's 100% in our control. So
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, hell yeah.
Well, and to connect to that, I think that, in our current time, I think what we're seeing, as an expression of that, in a large way in how that it feels like we're itching for some form of evolution. And I think that in a lot of ways, it will come on like this internal level. But I think that people who have maybe had any kind of a spiritual experience, whether it's a psychedelic one, and and I'll openly discuss psychedelics because I think that especially psilocybin, Paul Stamets has stated how healing that it can be. There's just so many positive effects to it, and I think that as we move forward and start to understand the science of the fungal world more, and I think that we tune into the natural world more, I think that we're at the same time, like Carl Sagan said, the world of psychology is evolving in tandem at the same rate as that of space exploration. So, what we're knowing about our outer universe, we're knowing at almost the same rate and speed as the inner universe. So, it's interesting because I think that how we imagine like deep space travel, I think in time could literally change on how the like how we meditate or something, you know? And I know that that might be a radical idea that's maybe
So can I
sci-fi,
just
but
repeat
yeah,
back what I heard is that the the complexity that we are looking externally from ourselves is just as vast as what's going on internally.
totally.
And so why treat ourselves as separate from the universe when
Oh,
we're so interconnected with all of it?
yeah. Well, we're in the age of materialism. So everything that we see as reality, we experience separate from ourselves. And that's I think why we're in such an individualistic age. But I think that the revolution is in the mind because I think that whenever you've had an experience that might be psychedelic, spiritual, um, you recognize how unified that we are and that separation really is an illusion. And you hear
Mhm.
people talk about quantum, um, you know, and really, yeah, everything kind of exists on this like very nebulous kind of level, you know, on the subatomic level. It's just particles floating
I
around,
dig how
you know?
expansive you see the world, and it's surprising that I mean this in the best way, it's surprising that you're so dialed in what you do. Like, so being that we both share multiple mediums of creating, to me, just to be frank, gets kinda chaotic sometimes,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
I neglect some hobbies when I'm growing others, and maybe I'm
mhm,
growing some hobbies from not a self-sustainable place.
mm,
How do you balance your
mm,
different crafts of being a tattoo artist
mhm,
and a painter
mhm,
and a musician and a
mhm.
philosopher?
Ah, oh man, yeah. I've been pretty multidimensional most of my life. You know, whenever I was in high school, I was in like 7 different clubs. I was literally the student council president. I was the founder of a film appreciation society. We were called the AV Club.
Cool.
I was vice president of the art club, of the German club. You know, I was just in. I was kind of like Max Fisher from the movie Rushmore,
Okay.
but my grades were good at the
Okay,
same
there we
time.
go.
You know, and I just had this level of motivation to just fulfill my dreams, and I think that to do that, like I said before, I'm from a working class background, and I think that hard work is what I've come from. And I think in order to get where I want to be, I recognize, like Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. But there's one thing remorseful about saying that because it's not about taking it easy. And if to paraphrase it better, it should be said, follow your blisters because it
Whoa.
really is hard work to get the things that really bring you joy in life, you know, and the satisfaction that you crave.
Wow.
And I just talked to somebody the other night, you know, that was like, I feel the most rested when I go to bed, just exhausted, you
Yes.
know, from
Yeah.
a hard work day, you know,
Well,
and even if it's like we get through the hard stuff, you know, but if it's satisfactory at the end of the day, then it's like your rest is really
to take it
like a
fundamental, when
gift.
you hit a workout, you sleep way better than if you just, sleep around all day.
Yeah.
That really does it. But kind of going back to my
Yeah.
question with different, like, do you say, like, today's an art day, today's a music day?
Mm.
Like, and I deeply respect that the discipline is something that's been
Yeah.
lifelong for you, but for me, it hasn't.
It
I
goes in waves, you know, I'm a human being. I think that there's always periods and I've just come to recognize, you know, the ebb and tide and the flow.
Okay.
And you know, that we're all gonna have moments where we struggle, or there's times where, you know, we're traveling or we're with family, you know, or we need to be present with someone, you know, and it might feel like it takes away, you know, from the creative discipline or the practice
Mm.
or whatever it is that you're dedicated to. Um, but I think that, you know, to go back to your question, it is a lot of discipline. I think that I do try to allocate time specifically and intentionally for whatever it is that I'm feeling that I need to be creating at that time.
Okay, that makes sense
Yeah,
because you were talking about, starting with internally
yeah,
and keeping the most, um micro functions of the self
Yeah.
and prioritizing those and then building outwards. So it
Yeah.
makes sense to say
That's well put.
that you are prioritizing those interests in the same way.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to that making space and time,
Okay.
and to maybe put it in a more scheduled way of saying it, like my two bands that I'm in, we rehearse every Sunday. I rehearse with Yellow. Every Wednesday, I rehearse with CERAS. And at about the same times, about 6:30 p.m., and here at the makeshift art space in the basement.
Makeshift.
And
Shout out to you
yeah,
guys. Hell yeah.
I've been rehearsing in this space, for so many years, because I was in a band that rehearsed here for years, and now I've been in Saris for 3 years rehearsing in this space. And yeah, so again, the space and the time, just dedicating that, even if it was just once a week, you know, um, it's showing up, and you hear people in yoga talk about that showing up. You
Mm.
showed up today. You showed up at the mat. You performed. You're doing
My
that.
stepdad says showing up's half the battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And largely because you are showing up for you and you're showing it for other people too, and the impact that we have on other people is huge. We don't always take that into account. And I
Mm.
think that that's one thing that I can say is positive about maybe Instagram stories,
Okay.
because as negative of an effect as it may be on some people's self esteem and feeling like they're getting uh, too much, like they can't regulate the serotonin intake or whatever from it or dopamine. Um,
You just mean like digital stimuli in
yeah,
general? Okay,
exactly.
gotcha.
Exactly. But for me, I think that where it's been constructive is I want to be showing up and showing what's possible because I think that how we lead is by example.
Yeah, yeah.
And as an artist, I need to be showing up for myself as much as other people. I mean, I have um, four nieces and a nephew, and I think that my influence on them is extreme. At least I don't take it lightly and how I want to show up in the world.
And that the external relationships that we have solidifies
Hmm.
what we're feeling, and
Yeah.
it bakes it into existence that I I might be scared about doing something, but
Hmm.
then once I say or once I do it and it's external in the world and there's other people who've connected with
Yes.
that now I've moved past
Hmm.
that perceived limitation maybe?
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. To go back earlier to something I was kind of referencing about like preparation, um, I look at it kind of like building a fire,
Okay, cool.
and
I dig analogies.
yeah, same. And I think that it takes this like necessary kind of like setting up. You can't just like throw it together,
Yeah.
and feel like it's gonna burn long and efficiently and bring warmth. And especially if you're talking about like a fire to warm your home, you want to have preparation into creating this fire that will yield warmth for your home and burn for a long while. And I think that that's kind of like when, at least how I approach creating art. I want to have this level of mindfulness and intention. And so whenever I'm getting ready to make a new piece, it's like uh, similar with building a fire. I could set everything up and just let it be, and walk away from it and be like, I know that's ready for me. So whenever it gets cold, I'm going to light it,
Wow.
you know? And
That
similar.
right there,
Yeah.
that simple but profound, because I think that, or at least what I've heard thus far, that sounds like how you are a successful multimedia creator and letting your investments not dominate
Yeah.
each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when the easel's set up and the
Right.
brushes are there, that doesn't conflict with
Hmm.
the practice space and the guitars that are there.
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
once you're if your heart leads you towards it or
Yep.
the interpersonal connection binds you
Hmm.
to that to be there, um, you can roll with the soul or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Ursula K. Le Guin said something, in regard to this as well, that's like, I want to love all of my children equally, so it's like you want to have kind of this equitable approach, to whatever it is that you're doing.
Mm,
And, this level of equal dedication where it's like, for me, because I am dedicated to many different tasks, it's like I want to give everything that same level of attention and focus and intention. And because otherwise it'll be kind of lacking,
dude, yeah.
and that's where I think you hear that catchphrase, you know, the jack of all trades sort of thing, the master of none phrase, where it's
Yeah.
like, and I'm not saying it correctly because I've always been like, I'm gonna totally not be that. Like I feel like I can do many things. I can wear many hats. And like I was saying before, anybody who's run their own business
Mhm.
recognizes you have to at times, not always, and it isn't necessarily healthy to always wear all the hats, but many times you have to know how to do it. Everything, David Lynch, great director of our time, he's said film is the synthesis of 7 different art forms, and I don't know exactly what they're,
I
and
get the gist,
yeah,
audio,
right.
photographies, you know?
And there's probably a lot more, but I think that there's like the 7 basic principles, and he kind of put it that he took time to getting to know each of those intimately,
Mm.
you know, and even his career as a filmmaker didn't begin until years after he had been a painter in school, and
Focused
almost
on shadow and light and
yes,
darkness, and
yes,
once you understand that relationship,
mhm,
and you understand the relationships of all those other different mediums, and you put it together, then you've really created something truly dimensional that can take shape, or something
yeah.
very
Well, I think that
definite.
anybody who has begun a disciplinary practice of any kind, uh, you kind of level up as time goes on, and your abilities develop, and you're not gonna, like anybody who has started to play music. Maybe your first song is "Smoke on the Water." You can't play "Smoke on the Water" forever, you know. Like you are gonna want to learn other things.
Mm.
You're going to want to grow out from that. You're going to want to expand, And for myself personally, I feel like domain expansion, uh, to reference Jujutsu Kaisen, is that's kind of like my special ability in a way, where I want to just be as expansive as possible because, I want to treat life like it's long.
Mm.
We always see life as short, but I do see life as precious, but I want to treat it like I'm going to be here for a while.
I think
So,
that's very beautiful in a respectful way to the self and to others,
yeah.
because you're focused on sustainability and you're
Yes.
not focused on dopamine hits of
Mm,
24 hours, 5 seconds.
mhm,
You're focused on,
mhm.
how is this gonna grow that snowball I'm rolling?
Yeah, you nailed it. Um, and just to use another analogy, and I'll reference the writer Octavia Butler, um, it's cultivator energy. It's kind of like a gardener mindset, and that you want to be planting these seeds for something that will grow. But in time, you don't have to continue being the person that is tending to it because it's going to continue growing on its own and feeding people over time.
That's cool.
And, something that even after I'm gone, it'll continue to produce fruit. And
I like
so
that.
I think that anybody who's, again, run a business of their own recognizes that maybe at the beginning you're wearing all the hats, you're doing all the things, you're the face of the business, like everybody knows that you're the guy, you're
Mm.
doing that thing. But after time goes on, you expand, you grow, you hire employees.
Outsource.
Yes, your business has to grow its roots out,
Cool.
and I think that that's where something really magical happens because as artists, as creators, we do get to fulfill these roles as cultivators,
Mm.
generators. We're creating something that is like fruit from a tree, that is gonna be yielded for, time and time and time again.
So with your analogy
Mhm.
of the gardener mentality,
Yeah.
the the soil can be our natural born creativity.
Mm.
The water could be our
It's getting
investment
deep into
of
it.
time and shit. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
honestly I could go really deep too. So I'll actually
But those are the
I'll preface it. But
resources.
I guess my to say it succinctly, my question is, where does the pruning come in?
Mm,
Because
yeah.
I the other day got the idea for like 3 more hobbies.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're
Mhm.
totally
Mhm.
unique, new like, doing collages on stickers and then sewing patches into
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
just I'm like, they're not connected to anything else
Mhm.
that I'm doing.
Mhm.
I wanna do it.
Mhm.
How does the pruning if you even see that
Yeah.
applicable to your process?
So I love that question. I think that's really a great question. I see myself as more of a permaculturist,
What does that mean?
and so permaculture, there isn't really pruning,
Ooh.
because everything as far as fruit that is yielded is, either consumable or usable. And then there's stuff that can be left behind, and that actually is like yielding for the plant
That's
in
a
many
trip
ways. And
because you're right.
and
You're 100% right.
and so there's this entire philosophy of permaculture where things don't need to necessarily be cut away, but almost trained how to grow in more of a level of harmony.
Mm,
And because and we're from merchant agriculturalist mindsets, and our uh, colonial age and still. So I think that whenever we're thinking about fruit and consumption, it's just like, oh, there's got to be pruning. How else do you get really good fruit? But
but even when a leaf falls,
mhm,
that organic matter
yeah,
is gonna break down to feed itself.
you're nailing it because nature does all of its work on its own. It
Whoa.
doesn't need humans to direct how it's creating on its most efficient level. Like,
Mm.
we often are trying to structure things. That's, again, that logic side of the mind, that's the rational side, that it's like trying to put everything in a box, and it's like, actually, there is no box.
Okay. Okay, so it's more of guiding.
We gotta get out of the way sometimes, and if anything, we have to recognize, how do we play a part in making harmony as opposed to dissonance?
So how does that harmony work
Mhm,
in,
mhm,
because like, most people that I feel are go with the flow
mm,
are not productive, and
mm,
how does that coincide? How does this all-encompassing natural intuitiveness fit
mhm.
with being a productive badass?
Yeah, I think it takes balance, balance is really key. Again, it's kind of into that circadian rhythm of things, and like prioritizing your time, what you're dedicating your time and your energy to, and Questlove has
Oh, yeah,
written,
Questlove, hell yeah.
he's written a number of books on creativity and the creative process. And he's, I think, a professor at NYU, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
And so he has seen the age of social media, and social media influence is, it's almost like overwhelming for most creators. And partly because he sees people that are overwhelmed and unproductive as really what's happened to them is they become like pancake people. And
What's a pancake person?
so we want to be, as he phrases, because he's like a foodie,
Yeah.
and so like he loves having these like food references, and so we love having like light, fluffy, rounded cake, you know, and
Spongy and delicious.
exactly, yeah, and that is inspiration for him. It's like when you've got the sponge,
Okay.
in your cake. It's got the
Okay.
bounce, it's got the fluff, that's rich, that's like what you want out of the quality of whatever it is that you're creating. Whereas if you've got too much starter, like too much yeast, too
Mm.
much sugar, what ends up happening is like your cake collapses. It gets too dense, it
You
spreads
just
out,
you this
it
analogy
gets
just made it click
thin.
for me.
Yeah, it's just like you maybe have something that's like it's dense, it's mealy, it's kinda, just like it's too much. It's oversaturated.
So I think I just understood a principle right now and had an aha moment. That I was kind of getting caught up on discipline of, like, how do I control this
Mm,
rigid thing
mm,
to have it be nice and fluid in
yeah.
certain parts and then hard in others, that I think
Mm,
what you're saying is just trace it back to where it's coming from.
mm,
That flour, the yeast, whatever the analogy may be, that
yeah,
our sleep, our eating,
yeah,
that those crucial things, if the discipline isn't working out externally, look at the system as a whole
right, right.
and then optimize it from its most core
Yeah.
elements.
Well, and to go further with what you're just saying is what you're consuming. So
Ooh,
what are your eyes taking in as well?
wow.
Because you're feeding your brain too, with like
Wow.
everything that you're consuming.
Yeah.
And so if you're taking in too much of the active ingredients that make you good at what you do, you're going to be too dense. Like people are going to be like, I don't need that, and you're going to feel that way about yourself too.
Have you seen the movie The Prestige?
Oh yeah.
Like, that where it's the 2 magicians
Yes.
battling it out, and they have one like to beat each other is the core goal,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
consumes every element of both their lives until it's a black hole.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
crazy. Yeah, wow.
And I love that, the Tesla character played by David Bowie kind of represents sort of the
That's David
mystic.
Bowie?
That's David Bowie that
I
plays
gotta
Tesla.
rewatch it. Cool.
Um,
He's
eh,
got that. Okay, sweet. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
and he's like the mystic kind of character, who is sort of removed from that entire need for competition
True.
because he's just sort of recognized that nature, is really the provider here,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's the thing that we don't understand, as human beings because we feel so evolved, like we've come out of the jungle, we're removed from the forest, like we've realized life and all its meanings now. Like let's move forward and go into space, you know. Um, and I think that for me as an artist, one of my greatest inspirations is nature, and my grandmother, the last couple times that I've seen her, I know that she's been like really concerned for my soul and she wants me to like find a church and I have to reassure her that it's like my church is in nature, because like I feel like the closest to I guess just what we're all a part of whenever I'm just in nature, and that's where I feel awe and I'm almost like reminded of just like how small that I am, and it just gives me all this gratitude, for what I get to be a part of.
Dude, wow. You've given me so many different little nuggets. I do have a couple of more, like, specific questions
Yeah.
that I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, but I wanna actually, usually I do this at the end of an episode and kind of recap some things, but since this went much more, um, like, fundamentally
Mm.
deep than I thought, I think I should recap it now so I don't lose any of it.
Yeah.
Um, Focus on systems as a whole
Mhm. Mhm.
and start very fundamentally and make sure
Yeah.
that we're introducing what would feed the whole,
Your basic
your
elements.
basic
Yeah.
elements. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That was one
Totally.
that I really
It's
dig.
your structure, all the preparation.
Yeah,
Preparation, preparation, preparation.
preparation. And then there were like 3 or 4 really good ones. And they're all kind of interconnected. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's like an overall system or strategy that, at times I don't really like zoom out and
hmm,
like think about, like, oh, this is what I'm doing every day. You know, like
okay,
I have this
so
like structure.
right there, you just sparked another one that you gave me. It was let that discipline
Mhm.
be externalized so you don't
Mhm.
have to have that weight on you
Yeah,
and that you can be free within your system that you create.
absolutely. Yeah. I just kind of know every day we're routine based as
Yeah.
humans. We love routine.
Mm.
And I kind of enjoyed disrupting my routine occasion to occasion, just because I think that that's how we sort of like grow.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy having the rhythms, of like every morning. There's like something that is centrally grounding
Mm,
to me. And it's sort of this process of just filling my cup, that way that each day my cup is full enough that if other people need me, I'm not having to go to other people and like expect them to fill my cup for me,
okay.
because it's like I've already done that. I already took this time every
That's
day,
beautiful.
to like I woke up and I stretched and I meditated and I made my coffee and I had a little yogurt to get the probiotics or
Yeah, I'm
whatever,
just
like
starting to get in that headspace myself where I have made the connection that I have a great day when it's sunny.
mm,
So, regardless of whatever the fuck the weather is, I'm gonna go outside and I'm gonna get that 15 minutes of sunlight in my eyeballs to start my day,
oh
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
creates a big difference.
Total, and there's so much hard science now
Mm,
that they're finding on,
we were talking to Andrew Huberman a little bit ago.
yes, exactly. Huberman Labs, they've been, doing all of these different studies on just how, like, exposing your eyes to 10 minutes of sunlight in the
Mm,
morning can improve your mood.
yeah, yeah, I feel it.
Yeah,
And then another thing, the that I'm gonna take away that was I think is really a really good one is, build those fires, and you don't have to light
mm,
them right when you build them. That
right,
you can create within your structure, you can have that preparation going into creating what only takes a
right.
spark to mobilize.
Yeah, it's just like any guitar player that uses, like, a tube amp, you can, like, turn your tube amp on, and just, like, walk away from it, let it warm up for a bit,
Yeah.
and then just, like, come back and be like, "Oh, yeah."
Enjoy all those nice warm harmonics.
Exactly, exactly. So it's similar, I think, with any artistic practice, um, in, like, a philosophical kind of way where it's just, like, there's things that we can do in our day to prepare us,
Yeah,
and I think that just to relate to that a little bit further, Lao Tzu and Alan Watts also, references
Alan
Lao
Watts,
Tzu,
very cool.
talking about the strongest element being the softest one, and that is water, because it's fluid. It's you could
Carved through stone, just keeps going.
absolutely, yeah, it takes any shape,
Yeah.
cut through it, it just reforms,
Mm,
and it's just there's no obstruction in its path. It always finds a way. And so I think that similar with how we navigate every day with our emotions,
yeah.
we have to allow things to pass through us.
Mm,
And so I think that when we're facing creativity, and we have all of these emotions that we're navigating through, I think that a lot of us find obstruction,
mm,
or there's things that get in the way, and I think that whenever, like we were talking about earlier, finding your flow state
mm.
and finding whatever it is that allows you to be most fluid in your expression day to day and just be in your total being as who you are, and there are, I think, a lot of elements that lead up to that. And I'll just say, going back, like I was talking about with my career as a barista for
Mhm.
years, and then deciding that I was going to move into being more of a full-time artist, and seeing myself as such and wanting to be seen as such. um
And by that you are.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. But I think that in my 20s, I said this to someone the other day, I took myself so seriously and I tried so hard.
Mm,
And I feel like people could sense it,
mm.
in this really weird way. Not that I was ever conscious of it. I wasn't, because I was trying so hard,
Gotcha,
to
you're
like
just in go, go,
prove
go
myself.
mode.
And I think we're kind of conditioned and almost trained to do that because of like, you get out of high school, you go to
You
college, you
get
gotta find a job. Yeah.
institutionally patted on the back for that.
Right, right. And you kind of forget, like, what am I doing? What actually is like making me tick or make me happy?
Mm,
What brings me joy? Like, not just what brings money into my bank account,
yeah,
or is fulfilling other people,
yeah.
and their expectations of me. Like, what do I need?
Going
And
back to
yeah.
that water, analogy, sometimes I there's something that I view as bigger than a regular emotion to process. I get afraid of trying to process it, but I think something that I'm gonna take away from this conversation
Mm,
is that I don't have to look at that head on right away, that I can go adjacent to it and let the water
Mm,
kind of carve away into it when I'm ready to, but
yeah.
just to work towards it and to let it flow through me where energy can, and let nature take care of the rest and just set up the foundation.
Well, to relate to you on exactly what you just said, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about creativity and creative inspiration. And he, talks about meditation a lot, but, his advice that he gives to anybody who's experiencing creative block, you know, you can't force it.
Mm,
It's really about waiting, giving it the time, allowing, because there's nothing like that feeling of like when the moment arrives and it's like you can't let it go. It's like I have to get this out of me right now. Like I need a pen and a paper. Where's a pen and a paper?
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
gotta I gotta
yeah,
get this
yeah,
down
the
right
creative
now.
strikes, yeah,
Y-
yeah.
That when the iron is hot,
There we
it's
go,
like you
yes.
can't let it pass.
Yeah.
And so how do we make the space and the time for that?
Mm,
On this energetic, intentional level for ourselves. And so anybody that's experiencing creative block, it's like you just have to allow yourself that space and that time. Trust that the water is carving around the rock,
mm.
that it is getting there, that the wellspring is there. It's just making its way to the surface. It takes time. Ideas take time to gestate,
I think that's inspirational and also consoling at the same time. Yeah, that is a feel good, and also there's a very tangible call to action to that, which takes
Mm.
the abstract into the tangible, so I dig it a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think Audre Lorde says, do whatever gives you that burning desire that, if you can't live without having expressed yourself, like express yourself, get it
Dude,
out there into the world,
hell yeah.
be heard. And I think that's the importance of creating art and recognizing that it is something that's very liberating for yourself. But you might not know how impactful that it might be for another person,
Cool.
and inspiring and, maybe light a fire for someone else,
Yeah.
who needs it.
Yeah, hell yeah. Oh, yeah. Dude, this conversation has been really honestly, more perspective shifting than little tips and tricks to go into things, which
Mm,
I think from our
mm,
talking about foundations and very granular ideas, I think
mhm.
that's very impactful and I dig it. I do have a tangible question though.
Yeah, yeah.
I dig your pedal board setup.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
cool. Do you have any words of wisdom going into, I know it's a
Mm,
a 180 pivot, but maybe there's a related
yep.
idea there, I don't know.
Um, yes, I'm trying to think of
It's
the terminology for it here.
ethereal, it's
Thank you, yeah.
groovy.
Um I think that how you chain things is really important. So, essentially, like the sequence of the pedals. So, what you're lining up, the order of things, like what comes first. Do you have distortion or boost coming in, or do you have reverb as the first thing? Like what's the chain sequence on mine? The first thing I think it's going from stereo chorus into tremolo, and then it kind of like signals over. I've got boost, distortion, and then it goes into this like reverb. Oh, I forgot the echo. Um, but anyway, there's just like a
Does the
sequence of pedals in
okay.
there, and all of them have like specific kind of like tonal roles,
Mm.
but I'm not having all of them active all of the time, at the
Oh,
same time.
okay.
They kind of like come in and out, and that I think is what creates like that dynamic range
Yeah,
of tone that I really love to explore. But I'm kind of a 90s kid,
mm,
so I'm like post rock era generation, and, saw like kind of the induction of hardcore and everything else after that. And so pedals were such a huge part of that entire era. I mean, you think about shoegaze music, and
yes,
that's like central to the music. And I had, kind of like a profound experience at a life changing moment in my life with My Bloody Valentine, and
cool.
I think it really just sort of set the path for me in a lot of like the music tone. that I'm still exploring today. And
So to repeat that back,
yeah,
you use the so I've heard that concept before about, like, the pedals that
yeah,
are before in a chain,
right.
that you're gonna get that flavor,
Mm. Hmm.
affected by the next
Yep.
process of it.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of like how a sound will carry over, and it's sort of like you don't want to be echoing the distortion. You want to be distorting the echo. And
Interesting.
at least that's
I
how.
just gotta play with it.
Yeah,
After
and
this, I'm gonna show you my pedal board.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
I mean, the reverb is the last thing on my chain, but that's because it kind of softens everything. It gives it sort of this nice, what do you call that whenever you have like like a vignette,
Okay.
like there's no real hard corners. Like you don't really ever have like hard attack, at
Mm.
least with the pedal that I'm using. It's just, it kind of softens everything.
So
And
the distortion so for that analogy, if there was distortion, it would be first in the chain because
it's
you
at least before the reverb.
because if it
Yeah.
was the last thing, you'd have all these
Hmm.
soft sounds, and then it'd be looked through this,
Hmm.
crunchy thing.
Right, but I'm making music that is really textural and atmospheric, and so the distortion and the overdrive, kind of benefits
Mm.
tonally from the reverb. Other musicians might not like that tone as
Okay,
much, it just kinda depends on what style that you're exploring,
okay.
and, um, Robin Guthrie from the Cocteau Twins is probably, like, my most influential guitar player, more so than, like, Kevin Shields of My Bloody Valentine,
Mm,
but, his tone is really ethereal and pretty dreamy, and, a lot of what he's doing is following, the sound of the voice,
okay.
and that's kinda how I like to play as well. I try to be an active listener as a player,
It's
and
very evident because I when you're performing, I can't tell what you're doing,
mm,
and that's what makes it that's what I wanted to ask you about the pedal board stuff. So it
oh,
does
yeah,
make sense that you're altering the textures
yeah,
throughout, a song, and it's not a stark, "Here's everything, here's nothing." It's, like,
yeah.
evolving, and I dig that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have, like, a mild form of synesthesia because, tone resonates so much for me in a similar way as, like, texture and color.
Hmm,
And I really like to explore a broad palette, especially with like color and texture. I mean, my paintings, you can't necessarily like see it like on Instagram, but I do like a gesso layer with a soft nappy roller, and it actually textures my canvases to almost be like stucco.
cool.
And so whenever I'm painting, I'm not just using brushes, I'm like using my fingers and my hands, and I'm like rubbing in the color, and
Mm,
that's like a big part of like the soft blending that I'm doing. And so the medium is kind of like part of it, and I think that whenever I'm writing songs, that's like where the pedals kind of have like this similar sort of crossover in how I can render these like textures and like various colors, in the sounds, because the
cool.
frequencies and the range of frequencies and sounds have similar kind of qualities as like colors and textures do.
Dude, I think that there's a level of awareness that I hope to tap into one day. Yeah, I really dig the perspectives that you've helped kind of outline and provide, um, how to be able to implement those into one's life, and then also the application of it through very tangible things. So, yeah, I just wanted to say this was a really cool conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This is really cool talking to you.
Thanks
So
for
I just want to
having
say
me.
thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. This is really nice.
Dude, hell
Appreciate it.
yeah.
Yeah.